Hey, this is Kevin from WinUsoft. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to create the sliding panel mobile menu from the Stripe website. This mobile menu will be built using native Oxygen 6 components. The various menu panels will be shown and hidden via Oxygen's powerful interactions feature. Lastly, there's a touch of CSS we'll add with WP Codebox. First, let's hop over to the Stripe website so that you can see the menu we'll be recreating in this video. Their menu is really smooth and nice to use. Let's open Oxygen and get started. The first thing we need is a container for our mobile menu. Add a container element to the builder and give it a class mobile menu container. Open the size properties, set the width to 100 vertical width and the height to 100 vertical height, and the overflow to auto. This will allow the menu to scroll if it ends up being taller than the screen. Next, open the layout properties and set the display to flex, the flex direction to column, and the alignment to left top. Open the position properties and set the position to absolute, the top and left to 0, and the z-index to 1000. Next, we'll open the background properties and set whatever color you need. We're going to use white in this tutorial. Then, open the border properties and set the width to 4 pixels and the color to gray. With our mobile menu set, let's add a container inside the mobile menu container, and we're going to add the class mobile menu inner. We're going to set the width of this class to 100%, and then we're going to set the display to flex, flex direction to column, and last, we're going to set alignment to top left. Then we're going to add another container inside our mobile menu inner container that we just created. We're going to give it the class logo row. We're going to set the width to 100% for this class, and it's a great idea to rename this in the structure panel so that you have a nice organization. I'm going to call this logo row. Then we're going to set some padding on all edges. I'm using variables that I set up previously, but you can use any values or variables that you need. We're going to set the display to flex, add a container link element to the logo row, and we're going to put an image element inside of it. Select whatever image you'd like to show at the top of the mobile menu, and then you can add a class to the image so that you're able to set its dimensions. Then add an icon to the logo row. We're going to use a close icon, but you can use whatever icon you'd like. And then we're going to add the class close menu to the icon. We'll then set the width and height and set the icon color. We'll open the custom CSS tab and we're going to add CSS so that the height and width from the close menu selector can be used by the icon. If you're likely to use the same size for icons throughout the menu, then you can rename the class close menu to menu icon. You'll also need to tweak the CSS in the custom CSS tab so that it applies to the new class. Add a new container to our mobile menu inner container, and then we're going to add the class menu divider and rename the element in the structure panel so that you can easily spot it later on. We'll set the width of this element to 100% and the height to 1 pixels and the background color to something that will contrast in the background. Now we're going to duplicate our logo row and move it down below our divider. We'll then rename it in the structure panel again so that way we know what we're looking at. We're going to call this products row, and then we're going to delete the container link element. Next, we're going to add a text element and change the tag if we need to. We're going to change the text to products to match the Stripe menu, and then we're going to drag it above the icon in the structure panel. Now to the text element, we're going to add the class mobile menu link text. We're going to use variables to set the color, the size, and weight of this class. Then we're going to select the icon in the products row, and we're going to swap it for a different icon. In this case, we'll just use this right arrow. Now we're going to duplicate the divider and the products row. Rename products to solutions. Duplicate the products row again and rename solutions to developers. We're going to duplicate this twice more. Once for the resources menu and also for the contact us link. Then for our contact us row, we're going to delete the icon from this row, and we're going to add a container link element instead. Within the container link element, we are going to drag a text element inside of it. We're going to change the text to contact sales, and we're going to set a link on the container link element to be our sales page. Then we're going to duplicate the row with the link in it, and we're going to change the text to pricing and set the link to our pricing page. Now let's rename all of our new rows within the structure panel so that you can easily see which row is which. Okay, with all of our rows named, let's go ahead and duplicate our pricing row. We're going to delete the container link and rename it to button row. We can now add a button that we've saved as a component to this row. We'll then duplicate the divider row multiple times in the structure panel and drag one between each of these rows. We're now done with this menu panel, so we can set the opacity for the mobile menu container class to 0. We also need to set the pointer events to none in the effects tab. The next thing we need to do is create a way to open the menu panel. To do this, we need to add an icon to the header. And we're going to add the class menu icon. We're going to make a copy of that class and rename it to open menu icon. And we're going to set the color to white. Update the custom CSS to use the new name class. With all this set, it's now time to add our first interaction. This is what we've been waiting for. So we're going to click on the interactions icon and we're going to add an interaction. We're going to set the trigger of our interaction to click, and the target is going to be to this element. Then we're going to click Add Action and select Add Class. Add the class Mobile Menu Open, set the target to the CSS selector, and type Body in the CSS selector box. Now we're going to switch over to our style sheet in WP Codebox. We need to manipulate the class Mobile Menu Container if the body also has class Mobile Menu Open. We need to set the opacity to 1, the visibility to visible, and we need to set the pointer events to all. Next, we need to switch back to the builder, save your changes, and take a look at the front end of the site. Reload the site to see the new changes. Click on the mobile menu icon, and we should see the menu appear. It does. Perfect. But I noticed that there's no mouse pointer when you click on it. So let's switch back to the builder, click on the open menu icon class, and set the cursor to pointer via effects cursor. Now let's reload the builder so that it can access the CSS we just created in WP Codebox. If you click on the open menu icon in the builder, you'll see that the menu now opens. Next, we're going to select the icon that's used to open the menu. So let's right-click the interactions icon and click Copy Interactions. These need to be pasted to the close icon in the builder. So next, we're going to select the close menu icon via the structure panel, and then we're going to right-click the interactions icon and click Paste Interactions. Edit the interactions so that instead of adding a class, you're now removing a class. And this is going to be the exact same class. So now let's save our changes and switch to the front end of the site and reload it. You don't get a mouse pointer when hovering over the close icon, so we'll quickly fix that by selecting the icon in the structure panel, clicking on the menu icon class, and setting the cursor to pointer. The next thing we need to do is to make the products panel for the menu. Let's add a new container to the structure panel. We'll add the class products panel. We'll set the width to 100 vertical width and the height to 100 vertical height. And let's go ahead and set the overflow to auto. Set the position to fixed and the left to 0. We're using a variable to set the top, which should take into account the height of the WordPress admin bar. Now let's go back to the products panel and set the z-index to 1001. It needs to be higher than the z-index on the mobile menu container. Now let's set the background and the borders. Let's duplicate the mobile menu inner and drag it inside the products panel. we'll delete everything other than the logo row in the first divider. Now let's rename the logo row to back row. We'll delete the logo as we don't need that any longer. Now let's add a container element to the back row, drag it above the icon, and we'll add the class back container. We'll set it to display the contents horizontally and set the item gap to something such as 4 pixels. Then we'll add an icon to our back container and we'll add the class menu icon. We'll add a text element and we'll change the text to back. So let's quickly review how our site is looking compared to Stripe. All right, so now back in Oxygen, we're going to add the class back text and we're going to set the text color. We'll select the back icon and change it to a left arrow. Then we'll select the Products panel, we'll expand the Effects tab, and we're going to add a transform. For the transform, we're going to set the X to 100%, the pointer events to none, and the opacity to 0. Great, so let's switch back to WP Codebox so that we can add the CSS that will allow the Products panel to show when the body has the class Products panel open. As with the mobile menu, we need to set the opacity to 0. We also need to set the transform so that the X is translated back to 0. Lastly, we set the pointer events to auto. We need to hide the first panel when the second panel is open. So we want the first panel to slide off to the left as the second panel comes in from the right. To do this, we need to change the transform of the mobile menu container by setting X to -100%. So let's switch back to the builder so that we can set up the interactions for this. The first thing we need to do is to add a class that can be used for the transition timing. Otherwise, everything will happen instantly. Select the mobile menu container and add the class menu panel transition. Select the Effects tab and add a transition. Then we'll set the property to all, the duration to 500, and the easing to ease in out. I'm going to lock the class so that it can't be changed by accident. Then we're going to select the Products panel and we're going to add the Menu Panel Transition class to it. We'll select the Open Menu icon and copy the interactions, and then we'll select the Products row in the first menu panel and paste the interactions onto that row. Now we'll update the interactions so that the CSS class that's added is now Products Panel Open. Let's reload the builder and open the menu. Now we can click on Products so that you can see the new panel slide in. The back arrow doesn't work yet because we need to copy the interactions from the Products row and paste them onto the back container, and then change the action from Add Class to Remove Class. Now let's select the Close menu icon and edit the interactions. We need to make sure it closes both the first and second panels. So we'll duplicate the existing action and change the class that's removed to Products Panel Open. Now let's check out how this is looking on the front end. Great. So let's go back to the builder and select the Products row. Now we're going to add the class Pointer and set the cursor to Pointer. Then we need to build the Products panel. We'll have a quick check of the menu on the Stripe site to see what we're going for. Okay, that looks great. So now let's add a new container to the mobile menu inner in the Products panel. And then we're going to add the class Panel Item row. We'll set the flex direction and give it some spacing. I'm using a variable and setting the spacing on all edges. Now we're going to add a text element. We're going to set the tag to an H4. And then we're going to add the class Menu Subheading. Actually, let's call this Mobile Menu Subheading. For this class, I'm going to set the color to primary. the text transform to capitalize, the size to medium, and the letter spacing to 2 pixels. We're going to need some space between the items in this row, so we're going to set the gap to 12 pixels. Now we're going to add a container link element, and we're going to add the class mobile menu icon row to this element. We'll set it to display horizontally and add an 8-pixel gap. We'll add an icon and add the class mobile menu panel icon. We'll set the width and the height, then open the custom CSS panel and add some CSS so that the size is passed to the SVG. And now you can select whatever icon you'd like. We'll select the class again, and now we're going to set the icon color. We'll add another container and add the class mobile menu text container. Now let's go back to our container link element and let's just add a link for that really quickly. Next, let's select the text container and we're going to add 2 text elements. We'll select the first one that we've added and add the class mobile menu heading, and we'll set the color to primary. Now let's select the second text element and we're going to add the class mobile menu info, and we'll set the color to something lighter. Next, let's select the container and we're going to set the flex direction for this class. We'll set the gap to 4 pixels. Now, let's change our text to mobile payments. The gap actually looks a little too big here, so let's go ahead and remove it. And then we'll select the top text element and change the line height to 1.1. We'll do the same on the second text element. And we're going to change the text here to make all sorts of payments here. This link is now looking pretty good, so we can duplicate it a few times. We also need to add some space below the subheading by adding some bottom margin. We now need to change the text and icon for each duplication. Now let's duplicate the divider and drag it below the panel item row. We're going to duplicate the entire panel item row and drag it below the divider. I think this needs a button here, so I'm also going to duplicate the button from the first panel and drag it down onto the second panel. Lastly, I'll duplicate the divider again and move it down to above the button. Great, I think this panel is done. I know some of the content is duplicated, but you can see how this works. With everything set, we can now duplicate the products panel to make the solutions panel. We'll select the duplicated panel, duplicate the products panel class, and rename it to solutions panel. Copy the interactions from the products row and paste them onto the solutions row. We'll update the interactions to use the class solutions panel open. We can also do the same for the developers and the resources row. Now we need to rename our panels within the structure panel to make it clear what they're used for. We need to set up some other classes in WP Codebox, so let's go ahead and head back over there. I'm going to copy the CSS for the products panel and then paste it here 3 times. Once for solutions, once for developers, and once for resources. I can then tweak the code so that it's relevant for each of the panels. I spotted that the cursor isn't a pointer on all of these rows, so I'm just going to quickly add the pointer class to them. Now let's reload Oxygen again so that it has access to the latest CSS and WP codebox. Okay, so we need to make a tweak to the back item in the Solutions panel as it's not removing the correct class in the interactions. The correct class should be Solutions panel open. The same is true for the close icon on this panel, so let's update that class too. We now need to create the other panels. As you can see, if you click Developers, then nothing happens as the Developers panel doesn't exist yet. Let's duplicate the Solutions panel. We'll change the first subheading to Developer Solutions, and we'll also rename the element to Developer Panel. As before, we'll need to duplicate the Solutions Panel class and rename it to Developers Panel. We'll also need to adjust the interactions on the back container and the close icon to remove the correct class. Let's now duplicate the Developers panel so that we can use it to make the Resources panel. And just like before, we need to rename this in the Structure panel, duplicate and rename the classes, and update the interactions. The last thing we need to do here is hide the mobile menu icon on desktop and show it on tablet. Let's go back to the front end of the site and check how everything's looking. Great, this is awesome. This looks perfect. One quick thing, I spotted that the Resources panel doesn't have the right heading, so I'll just go ahead and update that. And there we go, we're all set. I hope this was helpful. Once again, this is Kevin from WinUsoft. Thank you for watching.